Perfect, thank you. Lovely. So I'd like to welcome you to this Subject Overview Scrutiny Committee 2 meeting, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting has been recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber, Civic Offices, Angel Street, Bridge End, or from remote locations. Should I, as the Chair, experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, Councillor Alan Watham will step in and take over temporarily as Chair in my absence. And in his absence, then Councillor Ross Penhale-Thomas will step in, but I think we've got Councillor Watham here. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode? And members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask the officer to present a brief summary of the key points for the record. The agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack, please. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may wish to switch their microphones on at that point. Pardon me. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep the microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting, as agreed at the recent full council meeting. So I can see there's a few who are in the chamber with us, which is why they haven't got them on, so that's fine. We can see you in the chamber. Whether attending in the chamber or remotely, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in order that I receive the requests. If you're in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the mic to allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout its duration, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. So, item 1, apologies for absence. I will now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce the apologies for absence received.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Penhale-Thomas and Councillor Harrison. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please click the raised hand icon and I will come to you in turn for your declaration of interest. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare personal interest in agenda item 4.
No problem. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Personal interest in agenda item 5, please.
No problem, thank you. Claire.
Morning, Chair. I'd like to declare a prejudicial interest in agenda item 4, and I'll leave the chamber for that item.
No problem. Thank you. Anyone else? If you, as we're going through, decide that there is a prejudicial or personal interest, just raise your hand and we'll discuss that at the point it comes up. Item 3, approval of minutes. So can I please have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the 8th of July 2024, please?
I'll move.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. So Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins to move and Councillor Lewis, I think it was, to second. Thank you. Item 4. Pardon me. So we're going to come to the Community Resource Team and Package of Care Delays, POCD. And I can just confirm that Claire Marchant has left as well. Please note that Julia Wilkinson is the Directorate Manager for the Community Services and not the Clinical Services Group Manager as listed on the agenda. I will ask the officer to briefly introduce the report, and then I will call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in turn. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this morning. Just to say, we were expecting Julia Wilkinson to join the meeting, and Julia Wilkinson is the Health Board lead for Discharge to Recovery programme and also the pathway of care delays is the lead for the health board. So, and we were expecting her, so she may turn up later, but if we continue. So this morning we've got this report in front of you, and I'd like to introduce my colleagues. So Michelle King, who's our integrated manager for the community resource team, and she manages all the services that are described in the background of the report. And then Shagufta Khan, who's our lead social worker, social work, and she's here as part of the overall. So what the report seeks to do is to describe the current pressures that we're experiencing in the community resource team and how we're working with the health board to support individuals for those that are being discharged from the hospital. But it also then goes into some detail about our national requirements around the pathways of care delay in hospital and the work that we're doing across the whole system. So it describes in the report the discharge to recovery and assessment programme of work that's been introduced across the health board, and we're very much part of that. It describes the integrated... this is Julia Wilkinson arriving. We have introduced you, Julia. It also describes the integrated discharge and delivery board and the work that that board is doing across the region and some of the work plans that we've got in place in terms of that. It tries to describe in detail the pathway of care delays, what that is and what our requirement is, both at a national level and the work that undergoes across that. It gives some details of our actual numbers in that process and the work that we've been doing across that. We then get into the report and it gives you some details of the Bridgend specific around that and some of the work that we're doing at a local level in terms of that. It also then describes some work that's going on across the region led by the Health Board around the enhanced community care work and the national model that's proposed that we will introduce. And then it just describes some of the actual work that we're doing. So I'm happy to just give that as the brief overview. Is that okay, Chair?
That's perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm going to move on to members' questions, and page 11, 2.4.5, I believe we have a question from Councillor Williams, I think it is.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 11, 245, the reablement unit is at Brynner Kai residential home. There are 6 units in the home for the needs of the unit, and I just wondered if 6 were enough because it seems quite a low number. Thank you.
Okay, so we've had our reablement unit at Brynner Kai for quite a number of years now. Through COVID, our occupancy in there did decrease, and we're currently probably around 70 or 80% occupancy at there. It is something that we need to look at across the whole, but it isn't the only reablement things that we do. It's just those that need that 24/7. So at the moment, it's meeting the needs of the population that we've got. So
Thank
we
you.
do.
Julia?
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Hello, thanks for that question. Apologies, I was a little bit late. I'd want to emphasise that while pathway of care delays are really important, they're also sometimes a bit of a proxy measure, because what we are actually trying to do through pathway of care delays is expose delays, and actually we self-declare those delays. So actually sometimes high delays are quite good for the system because we're aware of what those delays are, and we have got a new system of capturing those delays which is unique to Wales. We're the only ones who have it. So I really want to emphasise high pathway of care delays are not necessarily bad. Of course they can be. What our absolute objective is to increase discharges and reduce length of stay, because then we are actually understanding tangibly that patients are being discharged when they should be. Around the question of beds, I do think it's a really important point within our system and the inequity that we've got across the areas. We've got 2 large community hospitals that support RCT and Merthyr, where pathway 2 and 3 beds are delivered. So yes, the reablement beds that we've got, we do need more beds within the system. And as Jackie says, it is sometimes difficult to fill those beds based on the needs of our patients. So across the system, we are needing more beds and we need equity in terms of our provision. So I think the issue around pathway of care delays can't detract us from what we're actually trying to achieve, which is prompt, timely discharge in a completely different criteria in the way that we used to report. Because previously, we would only report somebody as a delay if, as everything had been done to discharge them, including all of the assessments. We've now moved to a new model of discharge where we expect that assessment to happen in the community. And so I really want to emphasise the large-scale transformational change that is happening around the discharge model and delays overall.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, I can see your hands up. Is it in relation to what's just been said?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask you about that. Am I allowed to ask a question about that last statement because it's not in the report? Thanks.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has thrown up 1 or 2 questions because it's not in the report. I am going to allow members to ask questions if you want to ask questions on that, just because we have the opportunity because Julia's in the chamber with us. So does anybody have any questions on that? Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. So it's regarding the comparator data with Merthyr and RCT. I appreciate you may not have the information in front of you, but you've raised the issue. We are in deficit compared to those 2 areas. Can we have an idea of how much of a deficit we're in compared to those 2 areas? And what are the plans to you've mentioned it, but what are the actual plans in order to achieve parity with those other 2 areas? Thanks very much.
Are you talking now about bed-based services?
Yes, because as you said, those 2 areas have community hospitals and we don't.
Yeah,
I think that's what you said.
Yeah, there's currently a community ward in the Princess of Wales Hospital in Ward 21. So there is a community ward which has currently 17 beds. And of course, we have the Bryn beds for residential reablement as well. So in terms of comparative data across pathway of care delays, we can see that in terms of delays, as you would expect, Merthyr has our lowest number of delays because it is significantly smaller in terms of population. So when you look at the spread of population, only 11% of our residents across CTM reside in Merthyr. So you'd expect comparatively low numbers of pathway of care delays. However, their delays are lower than 11% overall. Obviously, our highest number of delays come from the RCT area, but again, it does represent 58% of the population of CTM. So as you would expect, their delays are higher.
Does that answer the question for you?
Can I come back, Chair? So just to be clear, my request regarding comparator data was on the number of beds, not discharges. Thanks.
Okay, so we don't allocate beds per local authority area. So, of course, community hospitals are accessible to every member of CTM. So if a Bridgend resident was accepting of attending YCC or YCR, we would certainly accept them. And we do. Absolutely. There are always Bridgend residents in community hospitals in the other areas. Obviously, sometimes it's not suitable for patients' families to be, if they live in the area, to be able to travel there. So what we do is we We deliver rehabilitation, which is currently delivered in community hospitals in Bridgend in the acute hospital. We've got the beds in the community ward as well as residential reablement. But in terms of beds, so the number of beds in YCC is 100 beds. In YCR is 108 beds, but both of those hospitals are open to Bridgend residents if they would come.
Thank you. Councillor Gebbie?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm sure members will be a bit aware it's a long time that I've been representing the fact that we have limited bed opportunities, particularly around discharge in Bridgend. But all members will be aware of the redevelopment of Maesteg Hospital. Part of the reason about that is because we want beds available to people in the locality rather than them having to travel. Excuse me. That is in development and design stage. You know, they are going through the appropriate processes. And what I would also draw members' attention to is not long ago I was privileged to bring Ellen and Morgan into the acute clinical team here in Bridgend. One of the reasons that we're really keen on that model is because we don't want people going into hospital. If there's a way of us delivering antibiotics via IV, that's normally something that would be in a clinical setting, but we can do it at home. And there's all sorts of things that we can do like that will keep people more reassured, especially those with cognitive impairments. We don't want to keep moving them. They get very disorientated. It causes more anxiety. So if we can think differently about how we deliver beds in Cwm Morgannwg as a whole, and I say that as the chair of the Regional Partnership Board, because it's not just about Bridgend. This has to be a whole system approach in Cwm, and we need to have similar processes, because otherwise our understanding and our data set is always going to be skewed. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. So in short, do I take from this that Bridgend has been lagging in terms of provision, but that has been addressed? And this comes from the fact that you've said that it's highlighted the issues, which is a good thing. That's what we want. We do want to know what the issues are, what the problems are, and it's highlighted that. And we are now working forward on that, because that was going to be my question. What are we doing? It's all well and good highlighting it, but here we are, and you're quite right. I'd forgotten about Maesteg Hospital coming back online, which is absolutely a good thing to bring that back. So we are moving forward, and that's the top line for this, is it?
I think the only other contribution I would make, Chair, is that it's not just about the beds, it's what we can deliver from those beds, because they need to be able to be stepped up or stepped down. And that's part of the problem. We're very limited at times. One of the reasons that Maesteg, the ward itself, and the beds needed developing was because in clinical terms, there's not enough space around the beds to actually deliver a service any more appropriately and with good health and safety, because, you know, you have to have that at the top of your mind. But I know that Jackie wants to make a contribution as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jackie?
I suppose I just wanted to put some context into the conversation, really. So the services that we've got in Bridgend, you know, we've been developing our integrated community offer for the last 10, 12 years, Michelle, haven't we, in terms of that. So I know that some of the services and what we're able to deliver in the community isn't replicated across the region. So our ability to support people in a clinical and a social care provision in a person's home is different to what happens in other areas. So whilst a Mrs. Jones in RCT or Merthyr might go to a community hospital to get her outcomes met, what we do in Bridgend is try and get her home and meet the same outcomes. So a direct comparison is probably not the right thing to do in terms of this. Part of the work that we're doing across the region now is looking at that whole integrated model, so that we do have those similar services across the region. We're not there yet, and that work is going to hopefully be done with some pace now, Julia, isn't it, in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So in the report, it talks about the ECC model. Some of that is about us supporting people, clinically led services with wraparound care for individuals that stops them needing to go to a community bed. So whilst beds are important and there are, very complex individuals that need a 24-hour setting, there are other people where we can manage those things in the community. So I just wanted to put that context out there. Yeah.
I'd like to support what Jackie said. I think that's what it's really important to understand. Whilst the data is the data, there is a nuance in the data. Bridgend patients' pathway of care delays are only captured within the Princess of Wales, whereas in the other systems, they're captured across the community hospitals as well. And I think that is a really important point. Jackie mentioned the integrated system they have in Bridgend, and to really support what Councillor Geeby says, the whole reason that we're implementing and we are so rigorous in reporting our delays is that we as a system, and the evidence base tells us that home is the best place to go after an acute hospital intervention to have your assessment done, unless there are clear safety risks to have that assessment done in a bed-based system. So the whole discharge to recover and assess model, the strap line for it is home first. And that is absolutely what we want to achieve. And in Bridgend, we have that ability with the acute clinical team to be able to discharge a higher acuity of patient that we are not able to do in the other systems because they don't have a similar service.
Thank you. So that does lead me to another question, and I'm glad that we've got you here, so hopefully you might be able to answer this. I've said it before, and I will say it again. Our social services here are really at the forefront of innovation in what they do. And actually, they're really good at bringing a problem to the surface, seeing a solution and thinking about it, not in the usual way, but looking at it holistically and bringing these solutions up in a really unique and innovative way. And they work really hard on that, and they are leading the way in our areas on these systems that they're implementing and ways of working and new pathways and things. In fact, I'm going to say it, they're quite brilliant. So there's no two ways about it. It's unique, and I know it doesn't happen in other areas. So because we're leading the way on this, and it is the way forward, I believe, because early intervention and keeping people in their homes and keeping people out of hospitals is going to relieve that pressure. What exactly are the others doing to follow our lead?
So I'm sorry, I thought that question was for me, sorry.
That's fine.
So absolutely, we absolutely know the drive is towards integration of health and social care with an absolute priority of keeping people at home appropriately. We know that unless somebody is acutely unwell, a hospital environment is actually not the right place to be. And I would, I would substantiate that assessment of Bridgend, absolutely, because I think that's why I wanted to emphasise our data in comparison to other systems, because I believe CTM is also leading the way nationally in the way that we collate data around pathway of care delays. We are reporting completely transparently and accurately at ward level, and we are the only system that is doing that. We are focusing on our patient experience because we are absolutely clear that if a patient no longer has, and it's a term that we use now, criteria to reside in an acute bed, i.e. they are acutely unwell, they should be somewhere else. And the whole reason that we are reporting these delays is to do the right thing for the patient, and we are placing scrutiny on ourselves to drive that innovation. In terms of other systems, there's been a lot of work done around what our integrated model is, how we integrate health and social care at community level, community therapies, community health, community social care. The new model, which is mentioned in this paper, is called Enhanced Community Care. And what that does is really guide us around the proportion of intervention that we would need to deliver for those patients. and we have proposed an enhanced community care level 4, which really looks at that higher acuity of patient, which kind of used to be called a hospital at home or a virtual ward. And we are very much driving that innovation across the region, building on the good practice of ACT and enhancing that team.
Thank you. Councillor Gebby?
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought it would be pertinent to reference that I'm attending a meeting this afternoon with the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care and Albert Heaney, who's the Chief Social Care Officer for Wales. I do that as part of my responsibilities around the regional partnership. And what we're talking about this afternoon is outlining our winter planning and preparedness. What I would say is winter planning and preparedness is an all year long situation now. It's no longer just confined to those winter months. And as part of what I'm reporting this afternoon, I'm reporting on our enhanced community care level 4 service, supporting discharge from home. But I can give you some other indications from other sort of health board areas. So Cardiff and Vale, they've got a strong discharge performance and their service is called Safe at Home. But they're doing forensic reviews of hospital flows. So there's wider conversations going on. We all meet quite regularly because we want to learn from good practice. But we know what's good practice, but actually the demand for these services is so high now, and actually it's not decreasing. I think that's the thing that we need to be aware of as members of council. That's not just for us in social services, but for Health Board and our third sector colleagues, because the impact is so significant across the board. What I would also say is I know that all health boards have been given instruction in relation to spend. 99% of health board spend was in clinical settings, so in acute clinical settings. However, they've been told by Welsh Government that they need to prioritise some of their spend now out into the communities, and we agree with that. If we can keep people out of hospitals, they engage better, there's less social isolation, we know that they have more interactions. One of the things that we keep talking about is dementia care. We've got an ageing population, we've got a rise in dementia cases. I can tell you that over the CTM area last year we diagnosed an extra 1,600 people, and we're already supporting nearly 6,500 people across the CTM area. And I think that's important because we haven't got the birth rate to support all these people. So we do need to be having different conversations about how we're going to support them going forward. And that might be AI. And I know there's an awful lot of conversations out there. And we're public services. It would take us years to get our AI through our governance structures and be able to use it properly. So it's not something that's coming tomorrow, but I think members need to keep a keen eye and advise, keep a watching brief on it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't disagree with you on AI, and I have been accused of banging on about AI for quite some time now at various levels of council. So, no, I do agree. Just before I bring you in very briefly, can I just ask as well, you've said there, Julia, that you're looking at the data and collating it, etc., etc. That's great that you're at that stage. How swiftly are you going to move? Because we've heard from Councillor Gebby that actually there is a real issue here, and that we as BCBC are leading that charge, we're leading that example, and early intervention is the way forward, I believe, and I know that our officers believe that, and it's working for us here. How are we going to get from collating data and being at that stage and knowing that we need to make that jump for the rest to join us and to work in a similar working practice? How far along the line are we on that, and how long will it take them to catch up, sort of thing?
So I think we're quite far along. It's definitely been something that we've been moving towards since the integrated model was agreed 18 months ago through the Regional Partnership Board. I think the integration of older adult mental health into that model is very, very important, as Councillor Gebby mentioned. We've done some analysis of acute inpatient admissions, and we can certainly share that data. The level of comorbidities, which is many, many disease factors, with an attribution of a dementia, has increased so significantly since COVID that not only have we got increased demand, but I think it's so important to mention the increased complexity associated with a cognitive decline or a dementia, which makes that admittance and discharge even more complicated and even more important, that we keep that patient safely in their own environment if possible. The ECC Level 4 model has been approved by the Health Board, and there are rapid plans in place to implement that ECC Level 4 and bolster the services that we currently have. We know it's a priority, and there is an absolute commitment that we do that rapidly. I can't give any timelines because that's really difficult, because obviously it involves quite significant organisational change, but it is absolutely a priority for us to provide that higher acuity support for patients, to stop them being admitted and discharge them quickly and appropriately.
Thank you. Jackie, can I bring you in, please?
Just to add a couple of things into those questions, really. So there is, across the region, we do have a regional senior officer whose job it is to bring in integrated services, and part of that is to implement a model that mirrors across the whole region, so that Mrs. Jones's outcomes are met across the whole, really. Part of that work is to get a legal document, something called a Section 33, and the plan is that we'll have a memorandum of understanding, which will be a pre-document towards that formal Section 33. But the timeline around that is that will be towards by the end of the financial year, so in terms of the pace. What I did want to say is that, so whilst I've already said that we've got different types of services here in Bridgend, equally there are things that happen across the region that we can learn from as well. So they've got an integrated front door system in parts of the service. So that is something that we would want to take forward there. So the work that, as the report describes, the integrated discharge board, the D2RA work that's happening, the enhanced community care and the pathway of care, they're all done at a regional level. So all of our day-to-day interaction across the region is about how do we do the best from all of that, really. So I just wanted to say that, our action plans are across the region, are the way we challenge each other, and all of that is across the region. And we can see that where the differences are, and, probably if you ask me, I could probably, say what we needed in Bridgend in terms of that, really. But the work that we're doing to support people in the community is absolutely the way that we want to go, and to enhance and build on what we've got. There is a very specific task and finish group that's been set up at the moment. For instance, that's looking at an integrated front and back door in the hospital. That's being done on a regional footprint. Feels like that's being done at a pace, really. So all of that work is being overseen by this integrated senior officer and reported up through the integrated boards that we've got, as well as at RPB level as well. So lots of interaction, lots of learning, and lots, trying to get the best model for the whole of the region.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to move us along to members' questions on the report, because we've got quite a few. So I'm going to bring Councillor Smith in next.
Thank you. I just had a quick question in relation to the recruitment and retention challenges within the Community Resource Team and Early Intervention and Prevention Hub, and how the council is sort of measuring that.
Who would like to take that, Jackie? Do you want to take that?
No, not specifically, just generally the recruitment and retention challenges that you face in.
So if I start, and then if Michelle, if there's anything you want to add. So there are two areas, really, in terms of the work that's covered by this report. Back, I don't know if people recall, back in February 2023, I brought a report into the Chamber that talked about our support at home and our domiciliary care workers. And at that point in time, we had a significant recruitment and retention issue in that area. What we did have is a programme of work overseen by senior managers across adult services and working in conjunction with our HR colleagues. And I can say now that you know, all of those things are in place and that we're not experiencing anywhere near the things that we did there. What we have got is in our early intervention and prevention hub, so in our social work assistance area, we have been experiencing some recruitment issues. And what the report describes in here is we have had some high levels of sickness in that area. So again, we've had some focused piece of works. We've got a focus action plan that's in place in terms of that. There have been times where I've had to deploy resources from other parts of the service to manage that, because that is our front door into our system. There is an improving picture, Michelle, isn't there? The last couple of weeks we have seen an improvement in there, and we are actively out to recruitment in terms of that. So I think we have blips in our system, and you know, generally our ability to recruit into social work assistants and social work posts is quite good in adult services in Bridgend. But I think it was a blip at the time when we wrote this report, but we are starting to see an improving picture in that space.
Do you want to add anything in, Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it can happen around holiday times as well. We tend to see lower numbers of applications. So we've been working closely with our marketing department as well, and they've had really good recruitment campaigns using social media. So we are just beginning to see the improvements.
Does that? Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing with my microphone. Grand, I'm glad that answers your question. Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. I raised this point at the last meeting as well regarding social care and the use of Employability Bridgend. Employability Bridgend do a fantastic job. I didn't hear that organisation, that part of the council mentioned in the last two answers. Working with HR and marketing is fine, but Employability will actually do a specific targeted campaign on a local area or a particular aspect of social care. So what I would like to see is that you know, the number one customer for Employability Bridgend should be the council services. So what I'd like to see is an increased focus by social care on that issue with Employability Bridgend. Thanks.
Thank you. Jackie?
Just to say, we do work closely with our employability team, and actually in conjunction with our employability team, we've actually devised a very specific course. It's called it's actually called Pathways to Care, which complicates it because that's what the national thing is. But actually, it's for people who don't know that they're really interested in care. And we've run one course and was really successful in terms of that. And there's another one about to run in October, and that's been led by, you know, like one of my officers, but actually by employability in terms of targeting different areas and stuff. So we do work very well on targeted areas with employability. So thank you for the question.
Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on, I think I had a question from Councillor Williams about the IHP.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a simple question, really. I'm looking at page 13 and paragraph 3.4.2, the Integrated Discharge Delivery Board. I was wondering what the makeup is of this board, not particularly names, but where the people are from, please.
So thank you for that question. So just to say that I chair that board on behalf of the region, and Julia is the vice chair of that board. It's made up of senior colleagues across health and social care, and those people that attend there are those that can actually make decisions and deploy resources, and so it's quite a senior operating board at that level.
I just add to that. It is very important what Jackie says. It is quite a senior board. We also invite the general managers of the acute hospitals that come to that board, as well as heads of nursing across acute sites and community sites, so that all of the system is represented, both community health, acute sites, as well as social care. So yeah, it's a really important decision-making board. And then we have more of an operational group that sits underneath it, that then guides the operating model and all of the resources that are supporting. And again, I do really want to emphasize this quite significant transformational change that we've started in CTM, which is the discharge to assess model rather than what we did previously, which was assess to discharge. So we did all of those assessments in an acute setting. So it is a completely different model, which has been very much guided by that integrated discharge delivery board that Jackie chairs.
Thank you both.
Thank you. I think I'm coming back to you again, Councillor Williams, for a question on 3.5.5, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's, as you said, 3.5.5. The table I'm looking at, which is actually 3.5.4, doesn't show Bridgend in a very good light. And I know that there is some actions are being taken. I think, will these actions being taken to improve Bridgend's standing in the All Wales rate be sufficient? Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
That's a really complicated answer, isn't it? in terms of that. So so just a couple of things really in terms of the context. We've already Julia acknowledged really that the way that we record pathway of care delays in our region is unique across Wales, because it's we use an electronic system in terms of that. So we anticipated probably last November that our performance in pathways of care across the region would be a worsening position, because we're actually recording every single one. So in terms of that, so what we have got in Bridgend is, you know, and to be very transparent, really, these are our top reasons for delays. We have got pieces of work that look at all of those areas of work, and that, you know, the actions that we've put in place are to get us to an improved picture. At a national level, we're instructed, I think is the word, isn't it? Instructed to improve our position against that. So all of the work, you know, in here, I described the work that we're doing around our reablement in the community. All of that work is to get us to an improved position in terms of that. What we have got in Bridgend is that in our care home population, so in terms of our residential homes and our nursing homes, we have very high occupancy, which isn't mirrored across Wales. So our capacity for people to go into that provision, we are in a number of cases in a waiting list type scenario, and whilst our ambition would be to increase our capacity in nursing home and residential home, there are a lot of barriers to new entries into that market, if I'm honest, here in Bridgend, yeah, but again, across the region. So our occupancies sometimes are, you know, 90%, 95% in some of our nursing provision. So some of those delays, the work that we're doing, I can't see us making a significant improvement in those parts of the service. So.
Could I add to that? I just really want to emphasise that improved position is a joint endeavour. So the local authority are doing a lot of work in this arena, looking at capacity of reablement, looking at residential reablement beds, but also discharge is a very complex process. If it was simple just to discharge somebody, it would have been done by now when we certainly wouldn't need so many interacting work streams. So we do have an improvement programme across all hospital sites as well that is done in partnership with the local authority. It's called the Optimise programme. And Optimise is about also ward staff taking responsibility around ensuring the right information comes to social care at the right time and emphasising the importance of flow and discharge processes across the system. We've recently been really lucky to have appointed an improvement nurse for the Optimise programme. And in fact, today, I'm going there straight after this, we're running our first accredited training programme to all ward managers across acute sites. That programme has been nominated for an NHS Excellence Award across Wales about the most innovative model of improved care. So it is a very innovative programme that we are doing in partnership to improve the process across the whole system. But I do have to emphasise, when we look at delays, the residential market is quite a fragile market, especially for those nursing beds. It's something that we really do note in terms of our delays overall.
Thank you for that.
You. I'm just going to bring Jackie back in, and then I do have a question as well, so I'll bring that in.
I was just wondering, we have got some examples about some of the complexities of discharge, and I just wondered whether it might help if we give you some, live examples. Would that be helpful?
That would be a help, actually. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think Michelle's going to take that for us.
Okay. So first example I've got is of Mrs. C. She's 91 years old, and she was referred and allocated a social worker the 17th of July this year. She has complex family dynamics, children living abroad, and there are safeguarding concerns and involvement with other family members who are living in the UK. So Mrs. C was admitted to hospital in January this year following a stroke, and she was moved to many wards during her admission. The stroke is affecting her cognition and physical abilities, which include speech. So she has speech and language therapy involvement in all the social work assessments due to difficulty conveying her thoughts, particularly around complex matters when she becomes emotional. So Mrs. C can become quite frustrated, confused and fatigued during these times, and she can lose her concentration when she's involved in long conversations. So the assessments have to be short, concise to get the best outcomes. So the assessment takes place over a number of sessions. We've also got to include the availability of the speech and language therapist at those times as well. So Mrs. C lacks insight into her care needs and doesn't always want to cooperate, as she doesn't choose the necessary support arrangements to support her discharge. So a mental capacity assessment undertaken, and she was referred for an independent mental health advocate support in the best interest meeting. Her son, who lives away, has deputyship in the form of a LPA, but refused to be involved. So the social worker has had to email the Office of Public Guardian for advice. Best interest meeting considered a care home placement to be in Mrs. C's best interest, but Mrs. C is refusing to go. She wants to go home. An application to the Court of Protection is now required. The family are talking to Mrs. C about having a trial period in a chosen care home to try it out. So that's one example. Another example is Mr. A. He's 80 years old. He was referred and allocated a social worker in the summer, again June. Complex family dynamics with the family again living abroad, and Mrs. A, his wife, being quite poorly herself, recovering from an operation and getting quite stressed with the conversations around her involvement in discharge planning. So she's reluctant to get involved in discharge planning. Mr. A required a mental capacity assessment, which had to be done twice, as the original assessment was inconclusive due to a loud, distracting ward environment. Following the second mental capacity assessment, that concluded that Mr. A lacked capacity to take part in discharge planning. Referral for an independent mental health advocate was sent. Involvement was delayed due to lack of availability of an advocate. Mrs. A is also requesting consideration of continuing healthcare, and a nursing assessment has had to be arranged. And a best interest meeting is being planned around availability of family who live away to support Mrs. A. That's the second example. And my final example is Mr. B. He's 83 years old. He was allocated a social worker in February of this year. He had changeable presentation and clinical condition through from the time of social work involvement, and this has meant that Mr. B has had to have his D2RA pathways changed due to varying confusion and concerns around his capacity to make decisions for discharge planning. His wife is terminally ill and prognosis is unclear, and his daughter is supporting his mother whilst also grieving from a close family bereavement. Mrs. B and daughter are concerned about being able to support Mr. B at home. The social worker has experienced difficulties getting in contact with the family and working around Mrs. B's medical appointments and periods of illness, which has delayed arrangement of crucial meetings to progress discharge planning. But Mr. B was discharged home July 24. They're just some examples.
Thank you. That's quite stark examples as well, isn't it? So is that the norm? Is that what we're seeing across the board? Is that what you wanted to come in and say? Okay, yes, please.
What I just wanted to add to that is that they are not unique. They are normal business for us. And our social work teams, alongside our colleagues on the acute site, that is, we could have 10, 12 people like that on any day. Yeah. So it's important to note that whilst we're required to do things at pace, we've got to do it right. So there's legal frameworks for us in terms of people with capacity and that. But actually, as professional, as the profession, we've got to do it right, not fast. So whilst pace is a requirement, and I'm always saying, where are we with that? What are we doing with that? And all of that, we have to get it right for families and for our Mrs. Jones, Mr. A's as well. So that is our normal business. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Williams?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I want to come back on this because you're quite right. I am well aware that actually issues around capacity and Alzheimer's and dementia, etc., are rising and rising quite rapidly. And that does present a problem for us as an authority, certainly with care home provision that we have at the moment being at capacity, etc. Now, we've heard today as well that we are being instructed and mandated to do certain things around this. I'm just wondering how much of and perhaps this is a political question, how much of a issue in terms of financing this is going to be and capacity is going to be, and what sort of support are we receiving to help us with that? Because it's all well and good being mandated, but are we getting the support to back that up? Thank you.
So my argument with Welsh Government is no. Yes, they give us various pots of regional funds that we are supposed to use to address all these issues. We are endeavouring to do the best that we can with the funding that's available to us. I don't think it's going to be enough. But then there's also the conversation and I'll go back to earlier. We know we've got an increase in demand. We know we've got an increase in complexity. But actually, how are we going to deliver services in the future? Because we're not going to have the people to deliver them. Never mind about finances. We're not going to have the people. And I think that's what we need to think about. There's also a conversation when we're talking about cognitive impairment about how much responsibility our residents take for themselves. We know that we've got more and more instances of alcohol-related brain injuries. It actually exhibits itself like dementia. So we know that if people are heavy drinkers throughout their life, you know, members in the room, I'm looking to you all, you know, it's a conversation that you need to have with anybody that you're in the pub with them. We know that that's going to have significant impact on their health. We talked about comorbidities earlier. We've got an increase in weight. The Healthy Weight Agenda, CTM, has got the population in Wales that is the most extreme in relation to our health. And some of those disadvantages is because of the communities that they live in, specifically around poverty as well. So there's all sorts of things that I think have an impact. Do I think we've got enough money? No. Do I think we're ever going to get enough money? When you look at the 22 billion that they're talking about in Westminster and that black hole that is public finances, I don't know where all this money is coming from either. So we do need to think about how we're having, what we're doing, how we're doing it differently, and we are all leaders in our communities. We need to get our communities to take a bit more ownership. You've heard me talk about before, you know, I'm an unpaid carer. My dad's got significant cognitive impairment. My mum's disabled. I don't have any package of care because at the minute, that's all right. But when it comes to that position, I need to know that we've got services in place that can support me and my family, because otherwise, the cost to the public purse is it will be a nursing home. The more we can, the less I want to say that we can change people's living and the way they live and who they live with in the meantime is going to be significant. But we've all changed the way we work. My children don't even live in the same county borough as me anymore. Neither do my aunts and uncles. We've changed the way we live as a family as well. And whereas Nan used to be there to pick up the kids from school and maybe look after an elderly parent, we're not in the same position anymore. So wider conversation. I can ramble on for hours, Chair, but I'm not sure that that's what you want from me. Thanks very much.
I wouldn't call it rambling. I think it's perfectly pertinent, actually. Thank you. Jackie.
I just wanted to add two things. I bought into Scrutiny a little while ago, didn't they? Our 3-year plan, and part of our 3-year plan is how do we sustain going forward. So part of our modelling in order to implement that plan is some of the work we're doing around reablement, which is described in the report. Attached in the report in Appendix 1 is the letter that we've had from Welsh Government about our that we've been instructed to do. One of those that specifically relate to the local authority and our integrated services is to increase the number of people accessing reablement by 20% by March 2025. So as I said, that's our programme of work. I've been in several national meetings the last couple of weeks where we've been talking about that with Albert Heaney, who's the Chief Social Services Officer, about how we are actually going to achieve that as well. So politically, but also at a senior officer level, and I was in a meeting with all the other heads of adult social care, and that was at the forefront of our conversation really about how are we going to achieve such a big increase, really. Yeah.
Sorry, it's a big increase in a very short period of time. That's quite a challenge. And when it's mandated as well, that is even more of a challenge, because if you don't do it, it doesn't look good on our authority, and it's not for the want of trying, or for the knowledge of knowing that we need to do it as well. It's not like we need Welsh Government to be telling us this. We do know. Sorry.
In terms of the targets of what we need to achieve, as Jackie mentioned, there is a letter associated with this around targets overall. They've told the system, every system, we need to reduce pathway of care delays by 20%. They've got a very specific focus on assessment delays, and we have been told we have to reduce assessment delays by 25%. The reason they're focusing initially on assessment delays is this whole change of model that we need to be discharging to assess rather than assessing to discharge. We have had some additional funding through the Regional Integration Fund to specifically target those assessment delays. We have now got a trusted assessor role that we have employed through the third sector. It's very, very early days. We're, again, one of the first systems that have employed that trusted assessor, and at the moment we're working through the competency framework about them being able to take some simple assessments so we use the registrant's time appropriately to do those more complex assessments. So in terms of all that we're doing, what we're being told is we need to realign the resources that we've already been given, which is basically through the RIF. We've been given some funding through the 6 goals of urgent and emergency care, which currently funds our discharge hub, but we have been told, there is no whole-scale funding that we can access to be able to improve this. We have to take it from different sources.
Okay, thank you. How can we as a committee support you with this as well? What would you suggest?
Keep representing views and opinions to Welsh Government ministers, please, Chair.
Not a problem. I'm quite happy to write to ministers about this. And if you wish, I'll speak to you after and we can formulate what sort of brief you'd like in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's also one more pertinent point. We talked about our new assessors. What's different in CTM is this process and our assessment forms and everything that we need has been agreed by Health and Social Services. It is not a health-led model, which is unlike other regions, is what I'm going to say. So when you see this reporting is accurate for community services. It is not for acute clinical. So there may be a delay, but part of that delay will be around doing an appropriate assessment on someone to ensure that they go out to the right appropriate setting for them. And that may be clinical, it may just be residential, or it may be back at home with some package of care, or it may be that they go home on reablement and then have no care at all. What we do know is that the longer we keep people in hospital, the more they decommission. Decondition. So I feel decommissioned some days. But I think that's important as well. So that's why you're seeing our figures reported as they are. What I would also say is the data set from our regional partnership is being used by Welsh Government. Welsh Government are taking on our data set because previously we had to report 540 pages of just numerical data to Welsh Government in relation to our regional partnership funding arrangements. So we are getting in a better place, but I think it's fighting the fight. So we need to keep on being very vocal and robust in our discussions. Thanks, Chair.
I just want to add to that. I know I keep saying the same thing, but I just really want to emphasise we are the only system that can digitally track delays. So as Councillor Geeby mentioned there, we do have a proportionate assessment that happens across health and social care, and we can literally, at a tap of a button, say, well, that's delayed. Other systems do separate assessments, paper-based assessments that they're not able to track. So necessarily our assessment delays look high because we really understand it and we're the only ones who have built a digital and auditable system to be able to say live data that should have been done today or yesterday. No other system does that. It is really quite innovative what we have implemented. And in conversations with Welsh Government, I think that really needs to be emphasised. We are focusing on doing the right thing for the patient by being completely transparent and digitalising a process which is completely auditable. That doesn't happen anywhere else.
Can I just ask why they're not doing it?
Because they haven't built the system in the way that we did. We prioritised it. We got a consultant in from England about what had happened in England because he was implemented in England in 2015. He helped us to build it. He came for a very short time and we have really run with it. We built it from within existing resources within CTM. We have got a collaborative group that designed and adapted that assessment. We were focused on doing the right thing for the patient. and we built it ourselves. Every other system is trying to catch up and do their own thing, but we were really, I mean, that's why, again, not to harp the point, why Optimise is going for this national award, because it's really been recognised as really good practice. But yet what we're getting then on the converse side is, well, why are your delays so high? And we're saying because, and no detriment to the other systems, because we really understand that. Yeah. We really understand it. And actually our measure of quality shouldn't be pathway of care delays. It should be length of stay, discharge, avoiding admissions, readmissions, the whole data suite, not just one proxy measure.
So we're really being penalised for being on top of it.
For being good. Yeah.
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 Chair, I want to say open and honest, but we will always do the right thing. And you've heard me say it about various services throughout health and social care. We must always do the right thing. But the right thing for the benefit of our communities is looking at this innovatively. We have a research, what's Dr. Goodwin's, the RIC Hub, Regional Innovation, something or other. It's part of my responsibilities as the regional partnership. I've actually got Dr. Tom, he's called, working in London with the Integration and Innovation Board up in London, because we're doing it from a joint perspective, and that's something that they can't get that conversation going in England. So they've had real struggles trying to have that conversation with health boards in England. So they're actually using a Welsh perspective for that piece of work now. Thanks very much.
So are Welsh Government prepared to regularise this as well? So where we're digitalising and others are not here in Wales, are they prepared to do that? And are they looking to do that across in England as well? Is that what you're saying?
It's wider than just a system. We are talking about AI and all sorts at that level. What I would say is that Welsh Government have a copy of lots of different things from our regional integration. They're also looking at our Section 33 agreement that Jackie spoke about earlier, because it's an innovative way of doing things, and it's a way of us addressing terms and conditions of our workforce, because that's vitally important for me. We need to ensure that we have the best staff doing the best job, that have the best service for our residents as much as possible within those restrictions of finance, Chair.
Thank you.
In terms of our electronic whiteboard, they can't mandate that across the system because there are already flow systems in place in other health board systems. Right. So what they're trying to do, and it is frustrating. We've got lots of different systems everywhere. They are standardising the measures that we report against. But of course, you have to declare that person as a delay to be able to standardise the way in which we report. Other health systems, they're very interested in our electronic whiteboard, but they would have to adapt systems that they already have. So, for example, in Swansea Bay, they've got something called Signal. In Betsy, they've got their own system. So it's a way of their developers building in what they've already got. We were really lucky in CTM that we had a very innovative development team within performance and IT, and they basically built it for us. And that was funded through the 6 Goals programme. So that's how we were able to do it so early in CTM.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we're not here to discuss other health boards and what they're doing at all, but I think where we're getting it right, I think sometimes Welsh Government might need to bite the bullet and look at how we're getting it right and others are not, and therefore just, regularise it across the board and standardise it. Because quite frankly, if we're being penalised for being good, that's absolutely ridiculous.
We're not. No, everybody's had the same targets, the 20% and the 25%. Everybody has had absolutely the same targets. So we are not being told that our targets are higher than every other system. The data is published where we are quite high in terms of the table. Of course, we want to improve those delay, but we are not financially penalised. We are not being penalised as in being given increased targets. Yeah. No.
Demonised? Potentially. We'll go with we're not being penalised. Right, thank you. Right. Moving on, Councillor Haynes, page 20, I think you had a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Paragraph 7.1, the end of the report, financial implications. It does originally say there are none, but it does acknowledge that there will be times of pressures within the health and social care system, or as government set targets that local authorities have to comply with. Additional resources may be required. Well, I suspect strongly that there will be additional resources required, certainly from what I've heard so far. So I wondered if any analysis had been carried out or any understanding was available on what possible levels of additional resources would be required in the near or medium term. If there's any information available that we could look at. Thank you.
I will continue to make representations across all levels about the finance for health and social care. One of the biggest arguments I have with the minute is in relation to finance. They have, Welsh Government have a policy where it should be the real living wage for all of our social care workers, as an example. I agree with that wholeheartedly. However, when we get our grant, when we get our consequentials as finance for the council, it is not hypothecated in that finance. So they tell us that we have it. I can guarantee to you that we don't. And I certainly would argue that we're causing issues further up the chain in all of our companies, whether that's private, public, health board, because we have compressed grades so much now. It is not worth being a supervisor and holding responsibility for all manner of things for an extra 20 pence an hour. So I'm being really very honest. I do think we need more money. I don't know how we're going to get that. We've got less people working in Wales now as well, which is another significant factor, which means we've got even less money going into any public service resource. So we need to think about it differently. It's not about what we've got, it's how can we do things differently, still achieve the same outcomes and still protect our residents. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you.
So absolutely agree, but also, as Councillor Geeby says, it's about using the resources that we've got differently as well. So within the D2RA model, there is evidence around something called failure demand, which is basically the deconditioning that we know happens in the acute hospital. So we have started, in terms of the discharge data, starting to understand something called the care tariff. So as somebody moves through the care escalator, we know often some patients are admitted with one domiciliary care call a day, no catastrophic event, and sometimes are discharged to very high levels of care. And that is often because we're either not discharging them in a timely way, or we are not ensuring they maintain that function. So it's about, yes, we need more resources in the system, but more targeted resources to maintain that independence and care for people in the community in a different way. So that failure demand and the data that we're capturing around that is very, very important.
Thank you. Just before I come to you, Jackie, I am going to bring Councillor Gebbit, because I think you're going to respond to this, aren't you?
Well, there's a couple of things that I think members need to be aware of. One would be the consultation on the package of care allowance that we are allowed to charge our residents. There was a consultation, All Wales consultation. Currently, we're allowed to charge residents £100 per week. This is assessed by their own income, so it's not something that we're just saying, if somebody can't afford it, they won't be paying for it. That's first and foremost. We did make representations. This is an all-Wales basis from all cabinet members, irrespective of their political colour, and all of our officers as well, to say that we wanted to see that increased to £125 per week. That would actually increase some of the spend that we have available to us in social services. We're not sure how that's going down. We still haven't got an outcome from that consultation, and we were expecting it, I want to say, at the end of August, and we still haven't had an outcome or a response from Welsh Government in relation to that. And I think the other thing that we need to be very clear about is we talked about some difficult cases. So Michelle talked about an LPA, lasting power of attorney, for members that don't realise what that piece of that acronym means. We know we fight families in relation to top-up costs, because they don't want families to go into places that we're identifying for them, or they want somewhere that's slightly better, that they think is better for their family, which is fine, but actually there are additional top-up costs which families are refusing to pay. Even though we assess every bit of spend for that individual. It's not, you know, and if there is a specific issue or difficulty that resident needed to go to that home, and that's what a care assessment identified, we would be paying it. But actually we have a fight. Well, I won't say we have a fight. We have robust discussions with family members around some of this stuff, because it is only fair, right and proper. Because if they were at home, they'd still be paying for all their electric. They would still be feeding themselves. They would still be having somebody come in to clean, and that would be done within the financial resource that was available to them at the time. We do protect people, though. So if somebody's finances are such that they are unable to meet those costs, we do it for them. But I think that's really important to know. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And that's refreshing to hear, actually. Jackie.
So a couple of things to add to the conversation. So you will recall that I brought in the 3-year plan, and part of our 3-year plan for adult social care is to try and meet the resource challenge, so both in terms of workforce and the financial resource. The director's annual report has come into the chamber. I think it's going to council soon. I don't know, this week or next, whenever council is really. And there's quite specific paragraphs in there around the financial resource to meet the requirements that are on us, the statutory requirements. So in adult services, you know, what we've got is an outcome-focused practice model. We've got a new operating model, which is where the early intervention and prevention hub is, and we've got our 3-year plan. All of that is aimed at targeting those most vulnerable, and aimed at targeting our resource at those in terms of being able to meet those demands. Some of the work that we've described here today, so the enhanced community care, the integrated discharge board, is all of us trying to work together to get the maximum out of the resources that we've got. We know what the whole system's like, so even if you flooded us with money, could we have the resources in terms of doing that? So I think you Chair, you talked about the transformational work that we're doing in social care, and this is no different to what we're doing now. In the report, I think it's at 3.5.6, it talks about the remodelling that we're doing in terms of our reablement services. So we know that currently 53.98% of individuals that go through a package of care that go through a reablement process with us, they don't need ongoing care. So what we want to do is up our reablement so that the percentage of people coming out means we don't need ongoing care, and therefore we've got less demand on our domiciliary budgets in order to do that. So that's the work that we're currently doing. But members will be aware that we are required, as part of our preparations for the medium-term financial strategy for the council, we are in the process of putting together savings proposals as well. So in terms of that context, we are still being required to put those forward, really. So part of, you know, it's not a simple answer, really. There's so many things in the pot here in terms of that. But so in order to meet the requirements in this report, what we're doing is the regional work and the reablement remodelling, really, with some pace behind it, really, to try and meet that requirement of us, but also thinking with our eye on the financial element of that as well. So,
thank you. No, that explains it very well, actually. Councillor Davis, can I bring you in?
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to couple of comments made, particularly Jackie's comments. What would be helpful is a suggestion, and it would enhance the officers' arguments contained in the reports. But Jackie mentioned that report put in previously. I remember reading that, it was good. Lots more information. What I would suggest is you put a link to that report in this report, because one of the things that's lacking from the snapshot is just even a little bit about, and we've touched on this earlier on, Councillor Kirby mentioned this earlier on, is the demographic information for the future, because we all know the issue is growing. It also relates to Councillor Haynes's point about financial implications. So it'd be really helpful if we could have just either a link to the previous report outlining the issue, or a short paragraph, a graph and a table giving an idea over the next 5, 10, 15 years of where we expect the demand to grow, and then the planning that goes along with that, and the financial implications. As I say, it's not a criticism, it would assist the officers, it would help us as councillors better understand the aims of the department in addressing those future issues. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I don't disagree with that. I think it would be helpful if we could possibly have that report just linked in, but I think that's just a housekeeping thing really, because I know you're quite new to the committee as well, Councillor Davis. We have seen that report here as well, but I do agree we've got a number of new councillors on this committee as well, so I think if we're mindful of that going forward as well. Councillor Gebby?
Thanks very much, Chair. I think it would be worthwhile resending the PNA, the Market Stability Report, and the Commissioning Strategy, the whole lot for adults, children's, for the whole committee as a one suite of documents, because that we keep referring to them. They've all been through scrutiny, Councillor Davis, so it might be worthwhile for reference sake. Thanks very much, Chair.
No, I'm quite content with that. That's something I'm happy to happen. Just very quickly as well, Councillor Gebby, I have a very quick question, because obviously we've had a change of government, which is helpful in most ways, because now we can see a through flow of continuity from Labour, who have taken over in Westminster, to Labour Welsh Government here, and obviously we have Labour who are running our council here. As such, I just wondered if there were conversations around the Barnett formula that you were aware of, and the consequentials to help with the funding that's coming down, and where we are with those, please. Just very briefly, I know it's a big topic.
Very briefly, Labour could have changed the Barnett consequential when they were last in power. It's recommended that we do. We still continue to make those representations, Chair, and I will continue to make those representations, because in all reality, so essentially, Scotland is always 3% better off than us in consequential form, and that's just down to that formula. So it does need to be reviewed. It is something that I will continue to make representations about, but all members, irrespective of their political flag, Chair, can make those representations too, because I think it would be worthwhile. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And I think it might be worthwhile this committee writing to make those recommendations as well, because you're quite right, it is cross-party, is that we're all on the same page, and even, I believe, Barnett himself has said.
I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, that one of the things that Lord Barnett keeps referencing is this was a year's deal, not 60-odd years.
Yes, and my apologies, Lord Barnett, not Barnett. We're not in school, sorry. Apologies, that was rude. Right, Jackie.
So not to add to anything political, but just to say at a national level, we had a conversation about the formula, and we discussed really the age element in there. So whilst we've got population demographics and all of that that's normally in there, but we discussed whether the percentage relating to older people could be increased to take into account the level of the prevalence of dementia, and we just threw that into the pot with Welsh Government. So just to tell you that we've had that conversation nationally as well.
That's interesting. I'm quite content to support that as well, because there is that differential that's coming up on the horizon, and we need to be in advance of that, really.
Well, it's to recognise really that when we're supporting older people now, we don't support just one thing for older people. They've got physical, they've got diseases, they've got frailty, as well as then cognitive impairment and sensory impairment, and that's very common for people there. So it's whether the formula could reflect the complexity of older people.
No, I'm content with that. Thank you. Moving on, I have Councillor Lewis coming in on page, apologies, page 21, 22, please. And I think your question was around the ability to explore early intervention with a continuity there. Thank you. Councillor Lewis? Have we lost Councillor Lewis?
Just to say, Chair, that Councillor Lewis did indicate that she may have to take a telephone during the meeting.
Okay.
She'd switch off the camera if that was
No, that's not a problem. That's fine. I'm happy to take this. So we can see in Appendix 1, we have the letter from the Minister as was, I believe. Yes, no longer First Minister now. We just wondered, because obviously we have the ability to explore early intervention with the Social Services Minister, who I believe is the same individual still. So there is that continuity. And I just wondered what the conversations were being had around that. And perhaps this is one for Councillor Gebby. I don't know if it strays into... So conversations around the ability to continue with the early intervention. Is that conversation being had at ministerial level?
That conversation is very definitely being had at ministerial level. I can rehearse the debate around statutory or non-statutory here in Chambers, and you've heard me all do it. You've all heard me do it, rather. Early intervention and prevention, we believe, is best practice. We want to be able to avoid any clinical or more resource-intensive support that we need to offer to people. And what we know is that the more we can do as an early intervention and prevention, it's just like the reablement service that we're talking about here today. We know that if we can deliver that, we're less likely to have an impact on other services going forward. And the cost and the resource isn't so hungry. We are having that conversation. Indeed, once I have finalised a draft of a letter that is going to Welsh Government from me, I will share it with the committee. I'm not at liberty to do so yet. I think it would be only good practice for me to share it with the Minister herself first. And part of that is around what discussions we are having around what we can avoid doing as a council. And what we can avoid doing is all that early intervention and prevention stuff that we're all sitting here promoting to you today as best practice, because it is. So those discussions are ongoing. We have informed Welsh Government. I was presenting and showcasing regional partnership last week to Welsh Government. And one of the things we were talking about was the early intervention and prevention work that we can do. And I actually showcased services here in Bridgend that we are doing to the best of our ability and actually our best practice. But we can't sustain that without the funding for it. And we need to be really clear about that with all our residents and members, members of the Senedd and members here in Council. We're not looking at some of this stuff because we want to. We're looking at some of this stuff because it's so resource intensive. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. So going forward on that, how can we as a committee support you with that?
Keep making those recommendations that you do. Keep writing to anybody that you can think of writing to. And the other thing that I would say is that we have lots of consultations come out from Welsh Government. If, as a committee, you could do some responses to those consultations, that would be enormously helpful, Chair.
Thank you, not a problem. Julia?
Yeah, to support that statement about how important that kind of population health kind of intervention that we need to do as part of the discharge work. It is kind of part of the 6 goals programme, the 6 goals of urgent and emergency care. And there is an expectation on us in primary and community services, and we do it through our network teams in Bridgend, to be delivering anticipatory care plans through primary care of patients that have been identified in GP practices as at risk of admission. They might not be getting a statutory package, but that we can see, unless we do something, that in the future they are at risk of admission. So that's work that is ongoing as well. So to have the right kind of services to support that anticipatory care plan is really important, so that people don't get admitted unless absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, I think I have a question from Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins on page 23, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually 2 questions, related questions. So, in the background, it says that in 2022 to 2023, the CIC focused on 3 priorities. I want to know where we are with them, please. And then going on to the next page, the priorities for action in 2024-25. I wanted to know, has a change been made in how you're tackling this, please?
Thank you. Who'd like to take that?
So, first of all, I think we need to be clear that the Care Action Committee is a Welsh Government committee. It is not hosted by us in Bridgend. I want to say we're doing particularly well. We know across all 7 health board regions that we are doing particularly well in relation to the care, avoiding hospital admission. What I would say to you is we can't influence some of that ourselves, not because I'm trying to be difficult, and I'm actually starting to sit on that committee from a member perspective. Because everyone is doing something slightly differently, whatever I say to you will be wrong, and I'll be giving you the wrong information, Chair. So I don't want to do that, because I think that wouldn't be helpful. The information that you've received in Appendix 1 actually came from Welsh Government and not from us. This is what they've told us we have to prioritise on. I can give you some spiel about how well we're doing in the CTM area, but that wouldn't be Bridgend specific. But I don't know if that would be helpful at this point, Chair.
Well, I'm just going to go back to Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, actually, and ask if you're wanting to know about Bridgend specific, if that would be helpful to you in terms of your question.
Yes, please, if that's okay.
I'll have to come back to you then.
Okay, no problem. Just with regards to my other question, I don't know if you can answer that, Councillor Gerby. Have any changes been made in how you're going to tackle the 2024-2025 priorities?
Jackie, do you want to go in?
So I just the letter here is that set those targets and talked about last winter, really. There are 3 areas within there. The ones that specifically relate to our integrated services is just the first one on there in relation to pathway of care delays due to assessments. And the work that we've been doing that I've described throughout this morning in terms of the integrated discharge board, the pathway of care action plans that we've got, are all of us across health and social care working towards, we've been reporting that nationally. We get called into monthly meetings with the national teams in order to do that. The increased capacity around district nurses and palliative care, that wouldn't be for our responsibility. In terms of the increased capacity, in terms of step up, step down beds, what the national team, they had a programme of work called 1,000 beds, and that was to create an extra 1,000 beds across Wales. We did participate in that, but rather than create beds, what we did is upped our reablement figures in order to meet the same outcomes. So we had a tenuous sort of link, really, I suppose, in terms of that. So in terms of those 3 priorities, that was what they focused on nationally. And I think in previous reports that I've brought here over the years, really, when we talk about winter pressures, and that and I know we have winter all the time, it feels like, in adult social care now, as Councillor Gebby said. But all of the work that we do in that space links to the work that gets reported up to the Care Action Committee. So it's a very strong focus and a two-way path between that. In terms of the 24-25 requirements in this winter, those again are the targets that Julia and myself have been talking about today that have been set by Welsh Government. So for us specifically, it would be around the reablement for the local authority. Yeah. But again, we can't think about it in terms of the local authority because it's an integrated service that we run, and all the work that we're doing is across health and social care in all of those forums that I've already talked about. So in terms of the work around the ECC, so the Enhanced Community Care, all of that is getting us to our response really to the actions that we're being required to do as part of this letter. So, you know, in terms of the oversight of this, there's quite robust oversight of this across the region, you know, right up to the RPB, to the chief exec level in terms of those meetings. In fact, Julia and myself got asked to go and present to the chief execs and the leaders of the council a couple of weeks ago about the work that we're doing in this space, really. So I suppose what I'm saying is that we're very clear what the targets are. What we're doing now is all the work that we're doing in all of the things that we've talked about today is helping us to achieve those. And, you know, the work around district nurses and palliative care in nursing homes, whilst that might sound very health driven, we, you know, in terms of district nursing here in Bridgend, that's part of our integrated services as well. So all of the work is being done, you know, and we want to, so whilst it's a target, you know, we want to do the right thing for our Mrs. Jones and you know, and patients as Julia refers to, really. So all of our work is trying to get us to achieving this. So I hope that gives you the context, really.
Thank you. Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just very briefly as well, obviously, if there's new targets that are coming down from Welsh Government, are they new targets? Yes-ish? Yes. Sorry, I thought they were. Are they being properly funded?
In terms of our targets, it is quite a complicated picture because we've got so many targets from so many pieces of work associated with this work. It is very, very complicated.
But just specifically the new targets, though,
so,
where
to do
it's changing
with POCD specifically.
Yes.
Okay.
Are they being properly funded?
As in delivery of reduction of them? Yes. Yeah, I think it's the piece we were talking about before, is about capacity in the community and whether that is being appropriately funded. What we are having to do is report against the priorities that you mentioned. So district nursing, the increase in district nursing has been funded through further faster funding. That is being reported back in terms of Welsh Government. We also have got quite a significant piece of work happening in palliative care, specialist palliative care, as well as general end-of-life care. We've got a new national specification that's out for consultation quite soon about how we meet those targets around a more community-based model for end-of-life and specialist palliative care. So I think it goes back to what we were talking about previously. Delivery of those targets is such a complicated picture of all bits of the system working together. We've got lots of different bits of funding in all in the round, really. There's no direct funding for reduction of pathway of care delays.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Right, moving on. Appendix 2, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, I've got you again with a question there. Thank you.
Yeah, it was just with regards to the discharge delays 6-2 fix. I just wanted an overview on what's being done to alleviate this, please.
Yes. 6-2 fix, yeah. Page 39.
Yeah.
So as we've said today, we've got quite robust governance structures in terms of oversight of all of this work. So the Integrated Discharge Board, the Pathway of Care Action Plan. So those are two very specific areas. We've talked about us bringing in D2RA, and that is a huge cultural shift that we've experienced across our communities, in our acute teams in both health again and social care really. What we know is that there are areas within all of that complex system really that we know that we need to fix in one sense. So this was us trying to condense into 6 areas all of the things that needs to be done, for us to, have the perfect system really, I suppose, in terms of that. So we've stated them in terms of the things that we could do. So in terms of the process things, so that the number 1 on that chart really, there's significant amount of work going on around that, and Julia talked about some training that's going on. This is quite a big piece of work really, but something that's already in place in terms of doing that. Some of the resource issues, so we're doing some work around some of that mapping, and those get reported up to like the 6 goals boards and, and up through the regional governance structure that we've got. Cultural stuff and compliance, again, there's work ongoing in terms of that. In terms of the service model, we are looking at, I talked earlier that we've got an integrated is it director? Is that his title? No.
He is a director.
He is a director, yeah. So we've got a specific post across the region that's been employed to look at that service model, and there's work ongoing there. I talked earlier about a targeted task and finish group looking at the front and back door. So all of that work is coming under that. In terms of capacity, again, that's some of the stuff that we've already mentioned today. There's work ongoing in terms of that. So we, as the Integrated Discharge Board, have oversight of this, and we are monitoring progress against that. There are some things we can fix together. There are some things that we're going to need either additional support or resources to do that.
Thank you. Does that answer the question for you, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins?
Yes, thank you.
Just wanted to say the 6 to Fix plan is very much about engagement with staff as well. We've got a very long and detailed action plan around POCD that we submit to Welsh Government on a quarterly basis, and we update monthly through the Integrated Discharge Board. I think we've given you some kind of insight into the level of complexity, that it's not just as simple as putting in an integrated discharge team and suddenly everything's fine. You've got to think about affecting the wards, how the wards behave. You've got to think about affecting the front door and behaviours around admission and tolerance of risk in the community. You've got to then think about intermediate care in the community and what capacity is there, as well as the independent sector and how we stimulate the market about what we actually need. So we've got this really long, detailed plan that we're all working towards, but fundamentally we need to get our teams on board with this and also give people a sense of optimism that we're doing something about it, because we get a lot of, Michelle, Jackie and myself, we're always interacting with ward staff, with nurses, with doctors, with therapists, with social workers, and really importantly, the patients and families in the middle. So to be able to communicate in a simple and visual way about the breadth of work that's taking place is really important for us. And I think an infographic and having these categories, we've now agreed that we're going to realign our complex plan to these categories so that we're really able to engage with staff, to give them that feeling of us working towards something positive, rather than that feeling of kind of helplessness that they feel when they can't see the patient moving through. So we have had lots and lots of change, and we've done so much support and engagement with staff, and we really need to get people on board in a really simple way. So I think that's why this plan is is a positive change forward, rather than, as we always do, we go into the detail, but having this overview is really, really important for our engagement processes.
Can I ask one supplementary, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's regarding number 4, compliance, reluctant discharge and choice. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, so again, we were the first system to write a new integrated discharge policy. And that is in line with the new D2RA processes and the new discharge to assess rather than assess to discharge. Last summer, we held a number of engagement sessions across all our hospital sites where ward staff, as well as people involved in discharge, told us what was bothering them about discharge. And some of that is when patients and families are reluctant to be discharged. Choice is very much around residential choice and how we offer that choice to patients and their families. So we've got a very detailed discharge policy as well as a procedure for every discharge blockage that was identified by staff members or people working in the system. And we have a reluctant discharge process, which is very simply outlined, and we also have a choice process, which is very simply outlined. What we need to do is support staff to have the confidence to implement these policies. We also have a housing and suitable housing policy, lots and lots of different processes. And the optimised programme, this training and support package we've got in place, is awareness of those processes and support to implement them effectively.
Thank you. Councillor Gebby, did you want to come in?
I think we need to sort of put a measure on this. We're sitting here talking about discharges and delays in services that I've got a couple of stats here that I was asked to represent later on today. The significant increase in attendances to emergency units and the growing admissions associated with the over 75s leading to systemic pressures. What we know is that it doesn't matter how much good work all of our officers, whether it's health board, third sector or local authority, we are never going to be able to manage this demand if we carry on the trajectory that we're on. And, you can see officers just sort of nodding their heads, and that's actually quite a frightening thought that we all need to consider. So when we're talking about doing things differently, not because we don't want to, it's because we actually definitely need to. We also know that preventative measures are really critical to reducing some of that demand. And we keep talking about healthier lifestyles and stuff. The biggest problems that we have in critical care is around cancer and heart complaints, I want to say at the minute. Heart disease, but that's all self-inflicted, a lot of it. So people, yes, people are born with abnormalities of various bits of their heart, and we sort of get that through different things. But actually, if they're big smokers, if they eat lots of red fatty foods, if they don't lead a healthy lifestyle, if they don't do any walking, if they don't do any exercise, and they don't actually look after themselves, actually that's quadrupling that demand in all these areas that we're talking about. And the complexities around some of these people are so significant now because everybody's living longer as well. So you would sort of expect that. Everybody's going to get a bit older, not in CTM necessarily, because actually our mortality rate is reducing slightly because of people's such poor health of people in the CTM area. So we do need to have a wider conversation about the community support, the preventative measures, all that early intervention and prevention stuff. And we need to also consider the national. So these are all national priorities when we talk about the Care Action Committee. Actually, whilst I might be going there to represent all local authorities across Wales, what I would say to you is we must look at our own communities when we're developing our own systems and services, because each community is so vastly different and what they need in support is so vastly different. So it's that national versus local priorities debate that we need to continue to have as well. And there's multiple drivers trying to tell us how we should be doing things differently. So we need to be very careful that we don't try to do a national driver that isn't going to fit with local circumstances as well. We need to think very creatively about the way we implement some of this stuff, Chair. Thanks very much.
No, thank you. I think just before we wrap it up as well, a final question from myself is that obviously we've got this as a RAG status, and we can see that there's only one green on there. There's 3 ambers and 2 reds. Are we concerned about that? Or is it a case of it's highlighting and we're working towards? Thank you.
I'm always concerned. would be my initial answer to that. I think it was more for us to highlight the areas that we need to concentrate on first. Yeah, so it's more once we've done the work and we've got the capacity mapping, then it's making sure that gets into the right place. In terms of the service model, some of the stuff that we've already described is working towards that. The Section 33 should actually try and bottom that out really. So there's work in progress on all of those areas, I would say.
And also really important to emphasise that's a regional RAG rating, not just for Bridgend.
Thank you. So moving on, I have a question from Councillor Haynes, please. Thank you. On finances, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. There is a trend in my questions which you'll probably detect around finance. However, I think it's important because without resource allocation, much of what we talk about is not likely to be implemented. So my question revolves around actually the discharge delays and 6 to fix. I think it's an excellent analysis of what needs to be done, and it's quite comprehensive. I also note on page 18, paragraph 3.5.7, that we're in the process of developing a more focused local 6 to fix action plan, which will align to the regional one, which seems to me to be very important. I notice on the bullet points that most of these actions are actually process changes, administrative changes, which I'm sure are important. But I notice also there are at least 3 of those bullet points, which I would imagine requires additional resources. For instance, seeking an increase in the licenses and training for the e-whiteboards, training and awareness of effective implementation of the integrated discharge policy and procedure, and ensuring that staff have regular changes at training, such as continuing healthcare. So my question revolves around resources. Are you content that you have sufficient resources to fund this localized, focused 6 to fix action plan? Thank you.
Yes, I can say that all the work that we're doing in Bridgend for the Bridgend locality does completely match what we're doing on a regional level. It's almost like our operating thing in terms of that. The resources that we need, for instance, for training that we've talked about is already built into our structures and into our workforce planning that we've already got in place. And as Julia said, there's a whole programme of work funded through various different streams in terms of that. So for all of those bullet points in 3.5.7, we don't need any additional resources in order for us to implement them. We're doing that within using our own resources that we've already got in the system, really, in terms of that. So,
thank you. Does that answer the question for you there, Councillor Haynes?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so I think if there's no more questions from members on this, I don't think there is. I can't see any hands up. I'd like to thank our invitees, and if you're not required for the next report, you may leave the meeting. I'm also going to call a short recess for 10 minutes, so if we can come back for 12:05 and just allow everyone a quick 10-minute break. Thank you. Cheers, and thank you. Appreciate it.